Okay, so welcome to the Academic Data Science Alliance Open Research, Open Scholarship Special Interest Group meeting. We're here chatting with Brandon Butler and Timothy Clark from the University of Virginia about open access policies at the School of Data Science and maybe beyond. Because we're a small crowd, we're going to do a quick round of introductions of who we are and what institution we're coming from. I'll start. I'm Steve Van Tile. I'm the community manager with Academic Data Science Alliance. And maybe I'll call out names. Brandon, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So I'm Brandon Butler. I'm the Director of Information Policy at the UVA Library. That means I'm a copyright nerd that has the best job of anybody that graduated my year in law school.
Wow, that's quite the bold claim. Maybe Tim can outdo you with his introduction.
No, I can't. He has one of the best jobs in the university, actually. But I'm an associate professor here in the School of Medicine, in public health, and neurology, and also in the School of Data Science. I'm a biomedical informatician by training, computer science guy.
Excellent. Go ahead.
So that's my introduction.
Perfect. Yasmin?
Hi, I'm Yasmin Chorish. I'm at the James Madison University Libraries, and I do stuff with ADSA as a community member.
Great. Michaela?
I'm Michaela Parker. I'm the founder and executive director for the Academic Data Science Alliance.
And Megan?
I am Megan Atkinson. I am the program associate for Academic Data Science Alliance.
Tiana?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiana, and I'm the communications and community assistant for Academic Data Science Alliance.
And I see Sheila here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Rabin. Good to be here. It's my first time coming to one of these. My title recently changed. So I am the program leader for persistent identifier communities at Lyrasis. So I am managing our ORCID US community consortium. And also we just started a US data site consortium for organizations that are not already a direct data site member or not already part of a regional data site consortium for DOIs. So good to be here. Hi, everyone.
That's great. You work with Martin Fenner a lot then.
I haven't worked with him quite that much yet. We literally just launched our data site program in January. So we're just getting started. But yes, looking forward to working with all of the data site staff.
Great. And Vasilis?
And I guess I'm the last, but not least, hopefully.
No.
We're going to have some more people. I'm a faculty, I'm associate professor with the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Houston, the downtown campus. Hopefully, this thing doesn't turn off, I'm sorry. So we were the first department to introduce the data science program in the state of Texas, by the way. We have a bachelor's in data sciences, and we use the Park City report to build our curriculum for your information. And we also have a master's in data analytics. It's a little bit softer. And for your information, our bachelor's in data science is the fastest growing major in our school. This is the third year that we start, and we have 110 students plus.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Great to hear.
And so my background is in computational mathematics. So I was in the task force to build the program and the curriculum. So anything that has to do with data sciences, I'm happy to participate in the National Berkeley workshop every year. And I look forward to this year too. And I want to join and learn from you guys. So, hey, I'm here.
Wonderful. Good to have you.
In anything that has to do with data science.
Awesome. And then Richard, you just joined while we were in the middle of this, but we're doing a quick round of introductions because we're kind of a small crew. So do you want to give a quick intro and then we'll jump into the session?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm at the University of Delaware and I'm in the math department. I helped found a MS in data science that involves all kinds of departments all around campus. We are ending our second full year, I guess. We've had a few graduates. We have about 30 people in the program, and I think we'll probably double in the fall. And yeah, so it's early days, but it's fun and busy and it's good. So
wonderful. Good to have you. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to, I believe Tim is going to share screen.
Right, if I can. So let's see. Oh yeah, okay, very good.
Excellent.
And can everybody see this?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I just want a quick shout out to our committee from the School of Data Science, and I'll hit them again on the at the tail end. But these folks were from various schools and departments, some of them with primary appointments in data science, and quite a few with primary appointments elsewhere. Nada Bassett had CS, is in the School of CS or the Department of Computer Science. Per Sederbergs and Jack Van Horn are in psychology. Kropko is in political science. And what's interesting about that is that, the issues that come up for sharing publications in an OA form actually vary by the domain. And the attitude varies by the domain. So we'll hit that coming back. So here's our current status of our OA. We have to call them OA guidelines. We were informed by the university, not policies. So they passed our academic affairs committee in the school unanimously and were published on February 3rd. And there's a fair amount of implementation work going on, which Brandon can tell you about. Claudia Schultz from SDS and Brandon and folks at the library are working together on this. So the main points here is, we're certainly not the first people in the country or the world to come out with an OA archival policy for faculty. And so we were able to base what we did on the Harvard model policy, which I'll provide a link to if you haven't already accessed it at the end. And that came out about 10 years ago, and several other institutions implemented it or tweaked it, and we're really able to kind of pressure test it, and so it got some tweaks along the way, and so we benefited from that. This is not the version 1.0 data access or publication, OA publication policy. But we added some things to this. We added a strong encouragement to share preprints via preprint servers, and an injunction to archive and share data and software in persistent repositories. So, several of my colleagues and I worked closely with, for example, the people at DataCite, the Harvard Dataverse team. We have an instance of the Dataverse data archive here at UVA, and with folks working on software accessibility issues too. And so we brought that into the policy. So this policy covers all scholarly works of SDS team members. What's a team member? That means faculty and staff. And that introduces a sort of a distinction in terms of how the copyrights are handled. we leverage the copyright license that's reserved by the UVA. And Brandon can talk more about this later, but basically the university says that, you know, your employees, even if you're faculty, so we basically have the first crack at copyrights on your works because they're works for hire. And if you're faculty, we'll return these copyrights to you for your use, but we reserve sort of a first dibs kind of access to your copyright for non-commercial work. And so that's really helpful to us. And I guess I mentioned about preprint servers and data and software. So we wanted to make this, and we really went through a lot of discussion on the committee over several months, but we wanted to make sure that this is not just a paper policy. So that it should be implemented with tools and instructions on the web to make it easy to comply with. So we already have a data archive. We already have the ability to archive publications, but the sort of the interface is maybe not as simple as it ought to be, and we're tweaking them and just making sure that people understand the policies. And in general, all of the sort of socialization things that you want to do to introduce a new set of policies.
Oh, I want to jump in real quick, Tim, and just highlight that.
Please do so anytime you wish.
So the online resources and in-person workshops, as Tim said, socializing the policy and helping people understand how it works is pretty standard issue. But what we're hoping to do, and this is hope right now, it's not done, but is the school is developing faculty profiling and reporting systems now. Those systems are being kind of chosen and designed and built. And so our hope is that since this policy is coming into play at exactly the same time as those systems are being built, that we'll be able to build connectors so that when people deposit their works in accordance with the policy, that will feed directly into the faculty profiling and annual reporting system. But you know, that's not a promise, but that's a goal that we're pursuing as part of our implementation. And I think that's pretty exciting if we can pull it off.
Yeah, I didn't know about that, Brandon, and that's neat to hear, because one of the challenges is to keep all your different lists of publications in various places up to date, right? At various places and in various formats. So what I guess I should have said at the outset is that this process for us started before the committee got their hands on it. And it started with some work by Brandon and Phil Bourne, our dean. And Phil and Brandon prepared a draft, a very ambitious draft, which they then intelligently turned over to the committee to work through. And the committee, as I said, people in the committee come from different backgrounds, and they were, I mean, they sort of volunteered, but maybe some of them were kind of drafted, kind of everybody that wants to do this step forward and a bunch of people step back, that kind of thing. So so you got a bunch of different viewpoints from people who were not particularly zealous advocates of open access, but who were open to discuss it, right? So how do you manage required deposition? What if you get into a conflict with, I don't have that written down here, but what if you get in a conflict with the publisher about having your material elsewhere? Is it too much to ask for people to deposit things in a preprint server as well? our colleague John Kropko raised this from political science raised this. Is this too strict? Because I could tell you, he says, that folks in the Department of Political Science have no respect whatsoever for open access publications and open access journals. They think that they're essentially bogus scholarship, and that it would harm you to publish in an open access journal. So I'll say here that the first draft version said that we want you to publish everything in an open access journal, which is a little bit over the top, in my opinion, or was. We took it out, right? Because even in fields that are very sympathetic to open access, like my field, if you still want to go to the top journal, Nature is not open access, right? Do we want to be a little stronger in asking people to deposit their data in software? So the way we resolved some of these issues, so we do require deposition in an open access repository. And how that works mechanically, we kind of punted on that and said it has to be, and this is really something that Harvard developed, and I think it makes sense, is you give it to the dean's designee, whoever that is, who then does what they're supposed to do with it. And that operational stuff is beyond the scope of this document, right? We recommend preprint server deposition as well. And I think there's no problem with that. And I think that it's a good practice. And I always put all of my things in preprint server just because it takes a long time to get them through review. And you'd like them to be out there and be discussed more. I think the COVID pandemic has really highlighted many of the pros and cons of preprint servers, but it certainly brought them to greater attention. So for OA publication, we sort of said, well, we think these journals are nice, but do what you want to do. And we focus on the repository. And I think that provides quite sufficient coverage for anybody wanting to find your publication and skirt paywalls. We made software and data deposition mandatory. And that's something that is really an enhancement beyond the Harvard model policy, which doesn't touch on those issues. And I think that those are really important because both with the increasing importance of computation in most fields now, if you don't know how a result was arrived at, you don't have the primary data or the data that you use for the analysis, and you don't have some notion of what the heck kind of software was used, you can't reproduce it in any way, and you can't even validate the result was really true. So other issues. And maybe this first one is a good one for Brandon to talk about, the copyright thing. I spoke about it before, but.
Yeah, so the way, and I'll elaborate on the UVA policy a little more later on, but what's relevant for purposes of this particular part of the issue is that there is a UVA, like every university, has a special little policy that says something about faculty ownership of copyright. And it's a way of, massaging the fact that technically under the law, faculty work is almost certainly a work made for hire and it belongs to the university. And so what do we do about that? Because nobody believes that, right? And nobody acts as if it's true. So we have a policy that says, no, it's okay. Faculty, you get to have your copyrights back. But that policy is only about faculty. So for staff, people like me, or for staff scientists and researchers who don't have a faculty appointment, that policy doesn't apply. And the work made for hire doctrine probably does. But in any case, no one's ever thought all the way through exactly what to do with those folks. And so we use the broader term team member And what we've done then is, this is where it becomes useful that the guidelines have the guidelines have a waiver that's very flexible, which we can talk about. And for staff members, that analysis may be a little different because they're coming from a different background than the faculty member. They're not covered by the UVA policy, and they don't have the same clarity about ownership. And so the language in our policy allows staff members to take advantage of the guidelines and to follow the guidelines, but also I think gives them the flexibility to seek waivers and to take slightly different approaches if need be, given the different treatment that they have under the university policy. So we're gonna, and this is a work in progress too, because we also want to get students, we want to give students an opportunity to follow these kinds of norms, but we haven't worked through that issue yet, right? How to do that. So, so there's still work to be done on how to navigate those issues. And I'll ask Tim to talk about software licenses. Even though I'm a lawyer, I think he knows a lot more about that than I do.
Yeah, so as I said, we require archival of software, and actually the current best practice is not just to put your software in GitHub, but to pull the version that you actually used in doing the analysis in your publication and put it into basically a data archive, or document archive. And the two ones that I'm most familiar with, but there are some discipline specific ones in the earth sciences, but there is Zenodo, which is at CERN, the big Large Hadron Collider place in Geneva, which is a huge document repository and data repository, as you could imagine. And GitHub and Zenodo informatics guys worked out just a little push button thing where you can very simply do the extract, and it goes into Zenodo and you get a DOI for that version of the software, right? And but then so it's accessible, but that doesn't mean, even if I don't say so, I still own the copyright on that software, or actually I think the university does too. And so you want to put an explicit open source license, and the ones that we cited are pretty, bog standard open source licenses. If you folks here are probably all familiar with at least MIT and Berkeley, which basically say you can use this software, do anything you want with it, copy it, change it, re-implement it, as long as you, number one, give credit to us, and number two, don't blame us if it doesn't work, right? And really, that's all they say. So, but those are important. And I'll just skip the machine readability thing, which is a can of worms. So for us, in the School of Data Science, which is a new school, it is an important set of guidelines to meet our goal of having transparent and robust scholarly output. And why do I say robust? Well, because again, the software and data, right? That if you don't accompany the publication, a publication that is coming out of the School of Data Science is going to emphasize software and data. If you don't accompany the publication with those artifacts, then you really have no guarantee of anything. The library gets to expand the use of Libra, which is the university's Dataverse implementation, and it gives them a certain clout with the publishers. Brandon, you want to say anything about that?
Sure, yeah.
Publishers.
Yeah, it's a way of anything we can do that opens up ways of accessing scholarship that aren't behind a paywall, gives us leverage with the publishers that we have to negotiate with over subscription prices and all that stuff, right? And so, we want to be a part of the solution And this practice of encouraging self-archiving is an important part of the solution to the paywall problem. You know, when UVA recently broke up its big deal with Elsevier, and part of why we were able to do that was that we were confident that a fair amount of stuff that people would want to read from Elsevier, from Elsevier's portfolio, is also available in a good version on a repository somewhere. And that's not a perfect solution, but it's a part of, a kind of 3 or 4 part solution to the problem of the paywall. So we definitely wanted to be a part of that solution by implementing a policy here that makes open content available and sort of undermines the monopoly of the publishers in that way.
Yep. And for UVA as a whole, perhaps this is the catalyst for wider adoption. And I think Brandon, again, also knows more about this than I do because he's been chatting with the folks on the Faculty Senate about this.
Yes, and there's a little slide a little later on, but the goal is this is a start of a wider conversation on campus. And it's a natural fit for data science, as for all the reasons we've already talked about. And then we hope we can move it out from there.
Okay, so this is your stuff, entirely your stuff, Brandon, because Brandon had the fun job after we built this thing with potentially broad implications for the university of going and having a chat with the provost in the VPR's office.
Yes. So the committee, wrote and endorsed this wonderful policy based on what Phil Bourne and I had drafted, but dramatically improved. And then, given our ambitions about spreading the good news about this approach, especially, but just generally, we wanted to give everybody a heads up. This is coming. We're working on it. This is about to happen. And so we went to the provost's office and said, hey, FYI, we're about to do this thing. It's never been done at UVA before, and we'd like to be the first of many to do it. And the provost said, awesome. That sounds great. Good luck. But can I have the lawyers look at it real quick? Because it looks like it's got some, I see the word copyright, I see the word license, I see, it sounds like you want to stick it to the publishers and that might make them mad. So, they sent it over to the university counsel's office. And the counsel's office at UVA is actually pretty great. They're not all great. It doesn't have to be that way, but I feel like we're actually pretty lucky. They're very client-centered, they want to try to help us do what we want to do. And so our counsel's office went through, I think, with an eye to trying to just make it work, right? And make sure that we didn't step in anything that they know about that we don't. And so one of the things that they flagged was, you can't call this a policy. To be called a policy at UVA, one must, jump through a whole additional set of university-wide policy making procedures, and that is where ideas go to die. Right. And so
bring back the crystal from the Dragon Mountain and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, the candid advice was, you could do that, but I don't think you want to. And so why don't you just call it guidelines instead? And so that's what we did. It's not a policy, it's a set of guidelines. Okay, fine. And then the other thing that the counsel's office suggested, which I love because it has huge implications for the rest of campus, was to make this pivot from the Harvard-style copyright maneuver, which is to say, by means of this policy, we, the faculty, grant a license to the university. And that's an accepted mechanism. It's been done at dozens and even hundreds of places, and it's worked for more than a decade. But we actually had the opportunity to use the existing UVA copyright policy, which I have it on good authority from the lawyer who helped to write it several years back. They put this nice little rights retention thing in there, and nobody knows about it. Nobody really cares. UVA has never exercised it in any organized way, but it says, yes, faculty even though copyright law says this is a work made for hire, we'll give the copyright back to you, but we're going to retain a non-exclusive license. So it's just a little non-exclusive license to make non-profit, non-commercial uses of all work by all UVA employees, including faculty. We're going to keep that right. That exists already. And so we didn't have to get anybody to agree to it. We didn't have to change any university level policy to make that happen. And it's been in place for years and years, and so it's nothing new. And whenever any other part of the university decides to sort of join the data science school in making this move, they don't have to create a new license either. They can just point to the existing policy. So this really made me happy when I learned about this idea and the council sort of said, did you know we have this thing? I was thrilled. So that was awesome. And then the last thing, very lawyerly thing that they did was to ensure that we mentioned all the other things that could possibly go wrong in the guidelines and tell people, don't forget, just because these guidelines tell you to post all your work publicly if you can, don't forget that there's reasons that you might not be able to, that don't have anything to do with this particular set of guidelines, like privacy, HIPAA, FERPA regulations, and also, sadly, licensing and ventures obligations, right? So if you've stumbled upon a commercially viable idea in your research, you need to make sure you tell the licensing and ventures group before you go mouthing it off to the rest of the world. But that's the guidelines never purported to undermine or contradict any of those things. But in an excess of caution, the council's office wanted us to be sure to flag them. Like, by the way, don't forget, you have all these other obligations. So we did all that. And I mean, in fact, God bless them, they did all that. The council's office, when they said you should try to do all these things, the provost said, well, why don't you do it? And made the council's office draft the changes. And then I looked them over and said, that looks good to us, and forwarded them on back to the committee and shared them with Tim and everybody. And we were all like, okay, this is still what we wanted. It's just a few words changed here and there. And so we were able to adopt these guidelines without ruffling any feathers. And ultimately, I found, I don't know if I think you've been on some of these where Dean Bourne, now Phil Bourne, will say, these set of guidelines has been vetted and endorsed by the council's office, which has a nice, patina of authority to it when we talk to other people. So it's all been to the good to have that opportunity to work with them on that.
And you want to say some more about this? This is your slide.
Yes. And so what does that mean? And there's a natural segue there. So we had a faculty senate open access task force that had been started a couple of years ago as part of our conversations about Elsevier and the big deal. When we said, look, the Elsevier journal packages are terrible, they cost too much, we're not going to pay for all that stuff for much longer. Some of the faculty on the Senate said, well, doesn't open access help to unsettle these big commercial publishers? And we said, yeah. If you want to do more open access around the campus, that would be great. And so they created this task force to explore kind of what could the faculty senate endorse or adopt as ways to increase open access around campus. And then COVID hit, right? And a lot of the people, it was especially destabilizing because a lot of the people who were in leadership on that were from the medical side. And so they just went completely into COVID mode. And we're focused on that. So the task force became dormant for a year and a half, it felt like, but it just sort of relaunched right about the same time as we were finishing up these guidelines. And so we forwarded them to that task force, and they're sort of considering the guidelines as some kind of a model potentially to either adopt just as a faculty senate to say, we believe this is the way all faculty should behave, or else perhaps to suggest strongly that other parts of the campus adopt them. I'm not sure what the next step will be, but this has been a major kind of restarting impetus for that effort. And then the other thing that we haven't really done yet, but that was always a part of the plan, was to just go to other schools and departments around campus and say, look, you know, the School of Data Science, not only did the school adopt these guidelines, but we also, you know, the School of Data Science also has part of promotion and tenure and evaluation is consideration of whether you're good at open practice. Have you been good at sharing your data and making your data available and contributing back to the community? And so what I think would be very effective and interesting is if we can start going to some of the other schools and departments around campus and endorsing that holistic approach of not just saying, isn't open access nice and here you should do it, but also saying, and actually we're going to evaluate you in part based on how well you're doing that. And one thing that I think helps is that the School of Data Science, everybody has a joint appointment just about, right? Or maybe everybody does literally. And so you've got people like John Kropko who, you know, it's going to be hard for him, but it's a conversation starter for him in his department where they otherwise probably wouldn't have even wanted to talk about this. Now they have a guy in their department who is also part of this other entity who has a whole different set of, you know, values and guidelines that he needs to figure out how to follow.
So this is the wrap-up slide. We're acknowledging folks, and you know, the committee actually, obviously Phil and Brandon put the original draft together. The committee really shook it down, and they went through a lot of tedium actually to do this, and a lot of agita among some of them too. So you know what I didn't do here with these slides, Brandon, is we should have put a link to our guidelines. Would have been nice. And we can share this with the group. We'll email you guys a link, okay? And I didn't mention this at the outset, but I have a hard stop in not too many minutes because of a appointment that I had set up a long time ago. So, but we're happy to have questions, and thank you for the opportunity to share our voyage with you.
Yeah, this has been great. Oh, go ahead, Brandon.
I was just going to say, I want to give credit to Tim for running that committee flawlessly in terms of, there really was agita. There was sort of, you know, struggling with the policy. There were lots of changes that happened, and yet somehow, you know, Tim drove that very efficiently. You know, from meeting to meeting, he had a very clear agenda that said, these are the 4 changes we talked about. These are the 4 outcomes we recommended. Is everybody on board or not? And I think it made it run, you know, as smoothly as it possibly could have, given all the work that was involved.
Oh, thanks, Brandon. I had some agita too, to be honest.
I could tell. It's all right.
Excellent. A round of Tums for everyone. So we do have a few questions in the chat, and again, given the small group, what I'd like to do is just ask these folks to unmute themselves and ask the question. So Yasmin, do you want to go ahead about the profiling system?
Yeah, can I ask the 2 that I have, and then I have to go pick up my daughter.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I was just wondering if the faculty profile system is being developed in the school or in the library or in the VPR office. And then the second question, more for Brandon, is the library doing any sort of coordinated strategy and outreach to those joint departments that are learning about these open access considerations?
So I think, you know, the answer to both of those questions is that the school is kind of in the driver's seat. The school is the one that is building a website right now, kind of an upgraded website, is my understanding. And Tim may know more, probably knows more about this than I do. But
No, I don't. I have heard nothing about this website.
Well, you can look forward to a shiny new website, Tim. We had kind of an implementation kickoff meeting not long ago with myself, Claudia Schultz, who was part of the committee and who's going to be kind of the school's lead implementor, and some other colleagues. And Claudia was the one who told me, you know, a faculty profile system that's going to feed into the new website, is all of that is being built now. And also there's a new
SDS is building it.
Yeah,
Ask
SDS is
these
building.
guys at the library what's going on in my own school. Okay, that's fine. You should have been paying
SDS
more attention.
I think I used this metaphor with Steve when we were planning this call, but I mean, really what we've done is we've put ourselves in a catapult with a bunch of parts and we've launched ourselves into the air. And now we're going to try and build an airplane before we hit the ground, but it's fine. It's going to be fine. So those systems are being built. The SDS is doing a ton of hiring right now. They have 17 open searches. And one of their new hires is a director of IT, and that person is been identified, and they start in a couple of weeks. And so we're going to be working closely with that person, the new director of IT, for her to help us make all these things talk to each other as she's building out the SDS back end, as it were. And for outreach to other schools, I'd say it's again, yeah. My sense is Phil is a very good messenger for this, and dean to dean, that's a very effective way to communicate. And that the library is we have good relationships around campus. I mean, I feel like people respect us and trust us, but on the other hand, I think that a dean of another school has more credibility than we do when they go and they say, hey, here's what we did, you should do it too.
Great. Michaela, do you want to ask your question here?
Yeah, sure. I'm hoping I actually understood this correctly, but it wouldn't surprise me that staff don't have the same copyright retention abilities as faculty, and that's a university-wide policy. And anytime I hear that there's benefits at that level that faculty have and not staff, I kind of raise my hackles, because something that we hear consistently in our community is that staff are treated as second-class citizens, even though they create a lot of the original intellectual content and, of course, software. So I guess my question is there any pushback or effort to change that policy, or at least provide some kind of waivers for staff?
I want to make a comment that this policy, when I actually looked it up, they number all these policies. This is RES for research, RES 001.
Yeah, I sort of love that. I mean, it's like,
Number one thing is to make sure staff are better than, faculty are above staff in some way, right? That's the number one thing we need to do.
No, I think I'm really in favor of democratizing all of this stuff, but I don't think they're going to let it go. Yeah. And the reason why, in my opinion, my relatively uneducated opinion, is that by law, really, they can treat everybody as slaves, right? Because everybody's doing work for hire. But because of faculty, they have to palliate them in some way, but they don't have to palliate the staff at this point in history, right? So
it's all very strange. I mean, the other thing to say is all of this is honored more in the breach, I suppose, or like I'm a staff member. I publish journal articles, I put CC0 on almost everything I publish. I give away the University of Virginia's intellectual property every day, and no one has stopped me. And
good on you. Good on you. Hooray for you.
Brandon, should I remind you that this is being recorded?
That's right. No, it's fine. It's fine.
What's
they don't want it. That's
right
the secret.
retention on this recording?
Nothing I do has much value, so it's probably fine.
I think what you do has a lot of value, Brandon, and you were really instrumental in making this work. I'm going to let Brandon answer all other questions, and thank you guys. Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
And hi, I guess Yasmin took off, but hi to our Virginia colleague down the road in Harrisonburg.
Excellent. Sheila, did you have a question? Yeah, you do in here.
It's not a question, really. Oh. It's just thanks for that presentation. That was really insightful. Just thinking about, the recognizing, trying to create incentives and recognize people for actually following the guidelines and doing the best practices. Something just came to mind that I wanted to let everyone know about, because there's a new tool called Res Cognito. I put a link to it there. So basically it's set up so that anyone who has an ORCID ID can log in with their ORCID ID and recognize anyone else who also has an ORCID ID for a whole bunch of different kinds of contributions and like good research behaviors. So you can log in and kind of look at it, but it also is set up with the idea that organizations can use this tool in their workflows to then recognize individuals. So rather than having like one person recognizing another person, it's like University of Virginia, School of Data Science is recognizing these individuals. So it's just something I wanted to put out there because it rang a bell in my head as y'all were talking about it. So yeah, just a comment.
That's great. And I should add, Tim didn't flag this because I think it's, it was definitely of interest to the committee and to Phil and to me and to the library, but maybe not to Tim as much. But we had a very important part of the policy from my point of view is actually that it also policy guidelines is that it includes a requirement that every researcher in the school get an ORCID ID. If you don't have one, you've got to get one. And, the nice thing about ORCID is how many things it can talk to and the ways that you can use it to build out things like faculty profiles. And the Libra repository that we have talks to ORCID and can, anything that's deposited into our repository is automatically, sort of added to your ORCID profile. And so making all these things talk to each other and making as much automatic as possible, I think is really going to be a key part of our, strategy to succeed here. So fingers crossed for all that to come together.
Yeah, University of Virginia, your ORCID integrations with your ETD repository and your open repository are one of the best examples that we have in the US right now of a custom repository integration. So yay.
Awesome. Yeah,
awesome.
We're
I
very
use it all the time as an example. Yeah.
Great.
That's
We're
great.
very proud. Yeah, we're very proud. And it is, it works on me. My thought process now is I should make sure I get that into Libra so it gets into ORCID
Yeah,
and it gets a
totally.
DOI and it gets, and that way it's all together.
Awesome.
Great. We maybe have time for one more question. And if there isn't a question from the audience, I've got a question for Brandon. Here we go. Okay, so I'm wondering about, so you mentioned a number of basically regulatory reasons that people could opt out of compliance with this, the guideline. I guess it's not a policy. So I'm assuming that includes things like human subjects research, et cetera, et cetera. Do you anticipate or have you had any discussions about non-regulatory reasons to opt out? Maybe just sort of broader ethical implications of the work or things that don't quite fall into human subjects research, but kind of border and there may be concerns about the data getting out there.
Yeah, so I'm sympathetic to that. Privacy law in the U.S. is bad. It's very underdeveloped. It's sort of the worst. It's the worst in the world, and nowhere in the world is very good. So yeah, definitely, I'm sympathetic to that, and I can imagine any number of use cases where it would be sort of technically legally okay and yet morally and ethically highly dubious to publish your data set. But the answer is we don't mention that in the policy. We don't flag that, but that's something I want to remember. We could make that part of our kind of workshops and orientations. And the way that we can accommodate that is that the waiver system is extremely permissive. I think we know from Harvard, the Harvard model policy does a nice job of explaining this, and everyone I've ever talked to who has an open access policy on campus, trying to make a waiver onerous or, it just doesn't work. There's really no upside to trying to compel people to do something that they just really don't want to do. And so having the waiver be essentially automatically granted as soon as someone says they want it is the way we're going to go. And we're not going to second guess your reason. We're not going to have you even necessarily. Now there is actually, we may ask people if they're willing to say a little bit about why they're requesting a waiver so that we can track that, because we would like to know over time, what's causing the waiver, so we can anticipate that and maybe help people, get comfortable with depositing if there's a reason that we might be able to remedy. But generally waiver is going to be, totally entitlement, anybody can get one for any reason at any time.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Well, we're running up on time, so I want to make sure everybody can run across campus to their next meeting. I laugh every time I say that. So thank you, Brandon, and to Tim, who's no longer here, for joining us today. It's really neat to see one of these things come together, and to think about what's going to happen in the future. And thank you all. I would say click the link to our website to see what SIG meetings we have coming up in the future. The website is down right now, though, because of an infrastructure problem that is a whole nother conversation that we should have in this SIG. So thank you all. It's good to have you here, and hopefully we see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.